I'm Kathleen. I'm an accredited practicing dietitian. I've worked here in Hervey Bay for the last 18 months, so I've gotten to know the area pretty well. I'm originally from the Lockyer Valley, which is a country town, if no one knows where that is. So I'm a farmer's kid, so I'm not a city gal. And today, has anyone seen a dietitian before? Yeah, so a few of you. For the rest of you, do you guys know what a dietitian does?
Food stuff.
Yeah, talk about food. Yeah, that's most of what I do, yeah. Yeah, does anyone have any other ideas what a dietitian does? Yeah? Yeah?
Google it, seen Dr. Mosley on TV.
Oh.
I assume that's...
Dr. Mosley, probably not a dietitian though.
Allergies and stuff like that.
Yeah, but you still sort of covers that area.
Yeah, so we do appear on TV sometimes. There are some media dietitians out there. We do also work with people who have allergies or intolerances, that's right. I mainly do chronic disease management, but I pretty much do everything, whoever walks in to see me. So I see everyone from age 2 up to age 94 or older. I haven't had anyone beat the record of 94 yet. So today we'll be talking about cholesterol and heart health and everything involved with it and some strategies on managing your cholesterol levels. So we'll just click go. So we'll talk about what is cholesterol, like what is it, what does it do? We're going to talk about the differences between the different types of cholesterol and what on earth they are. We're also going to talk about how to interpret your blood test result because your GP is just going to tell you it's low or it's high and not much else. We're also going to go through some lifestyle and diet strategies in like general of what works for people for managing their cholesterol. But of course today I can't give individualized advice. So of course if you do want individualized advice for your certain situation, it's best to get a referral to see me, whether it's a Medicare referral, if you're through the Medicare system, whether if you're a veteran it's through DVA, or if you don't have any of those options available, I am able to do private visits as well. Alrighty, so let's get started. What is cholesterol? So we actually need cholesterol. It does a lot of things in our body. So it's a component of cell membranes. It's also used to make hormones. It's also used to make bile acids, so we really do need it. And the liver makes cholesterol. So depending on who we are, the liver makes different amounts of cholesterol and different types of cholesterol. So our diet does influence what the liver makes. So we'll talk about today of what does influence your cholesterol levels in terms of diet. So we have the two main types of cholesterol. You have the bad cholesterol and the good cholesterol. So their actual technical names are LDL and HDL, or low density lipoprotein or high density lipoprotein, if you really want to be technical about it. So we want to think about HDL as the good guy. He's the little angel, and LDL is the bad guy. He's the little devil. This is kind of more of an accurate representation of what they look like. They carry fat around the body in our blood vessels. They're like messengers. They carry stuff for the liver and take it where it needs to go. I like to think that LDL is like a messy kid, and it takes the toys from the toy box and throws them all over the floor, everywhere. And then HDL is the good kid, which picks up the toys on the floor and takes them and puts them back in the toy box. So it's basically, that's what they're doing. HDL is taking the fat that's been put out in the body and taking it back to the liver for storage, and LDL is taking it from the liver out into the body. So it's the balance of these two that is important for our heart health. So LDL cholesterol. So it's the bad one because it's associated with increased risk of heart attack and stroke because it's going and leaving fatty deposits all around the body, especially if there's too much LDL. It doesn't kind of know where to put it, so it kind of just leaves it everywhere. Which, leaving it everywhere, usually entails leaving it in your blood vessels. It kind of burrows into the wall of your blood vessel and leaves a big fatty plaque there, which impedes blood flow. And it also has a high risk of breaking off as a fatty plaque and floating away and getting stuck somewhere in a blood vessel, like in your heart or in your brain, which is why we have possible heart attack and stroke risk from that. So it also tends to promote an inflammatory state in the body by causing that damage to our blood vessels. So that's why we call it bad. Alrighty, I went one too many. There you go. HDL cholesterol. So it neutralizes the bad effects of LDL cholesterol. So it cleans up the mess that's left in the arteries and packs it away. It also tends to stabilize those plaques as well and reduce the risk of parts breaking off and getting stuck somewhere else. So that's really important. And it overall reduces the inflammatory state that LDL causes. It doesn't burrow into our blood vessels and cause damage. It's a nice friendly lipoprotein. And then the third player in cholesterol is triglycerides. So it rises in our blood after we've eaten a high-fat meal. So depending on how much fat we're eating is how much triglycerides are in our blood. So for instance, if you went to a place like the Golden Arches and had a burger and some chips, which is a very high-fat meal, your triglyceride levels after that meal would be very, very high, which makes your blood kind of cloudy and gluggy and sticky. And that's kind of puts you at more risk of chronic diseases because we don't want heaps and heaps of sticky blood and high levels of fats in your blood. So too much fat, having a high body weight or having too much alcohol tends to raise your triglyceride levels, and it tends to amplify the bad effects of LDL. So what does your blood test mean? We have some basic ideal values here, but depending on your age, your gender, and your chronic health conditions, your reference range will be different. Young people, they usually say that your cholesterol should be less than 6, whereas people who are over the age of 65 or someone who has diabetes or a history of heart disease or stroke, they usually say less than 4 for your total cholesterol. For LDL, we try and keep it below 2 because it's the bad one. We don't want too much of that. HDL, we want it to be more than 1 at least to try and help balance out that LDL. And then triglycerides, we generally want to keep them less than 2. But of course, you can always check your blood test. It will have a little brackets at the end with the reference range. And also asking with your doctor is, what should I be aiming for? But usually they will just give you in the appointment, yeah, your cholesterol's a bit high. And you go, cool story. What do I do about that? And he goes, see the dietitian, and I haven't got any time left. And that's all. That's unfortunate. They only have about 10 minutes with you, so they don't have time to explain things fully, which is what my job is. Alrighty, so ways to modify your cholesterol levels. Diet and lifestyle plays a huge role in your cholesterol levels, as does genetics, but we can do a lot of things before we worry about your genetics. So for instance, being a healthy weight helps keep your cholesterol levels under control, because having more body fat means that there's going to be more fat particles floating around in your blood. So if you can maintain a healthy weight, or even if you just lose 5 to 10% of your body weight, that's going to make a huge difference to your cholesterol levels. So in terms of which is more important, diet or exercise, diet has the biggest impact on your cholesterol levels. So we don't know whether it's the diet changes that cause the cholesterol levels to go down or whether it's the weight loss that makes cholesterol levels down, but I think it's a combination of both. So a little bit of weight loss and improving your diet quality and improving your overall dietary patterns tends to have the biggest positive impact on your cholesterol levels. So obviously, seeing a dietitian can help because everyone's a little bit different, everyone's situation is different, everyone likes to eat different food. So giving individualized advice is the best way to make your diet changes sustainable. All right, so strategies to reduce LDL cholesterol. The amount of LDL cholesterol your liver makes is dependent on how much saturated fat you eat. The more saturated fat you eat, the higher your LDL cholesterol levels are. It's not the cholesterol you eat that changes your cholesterol level. It's mostly your saturated fat intake that has the biggest impact. So that means the cholesterol in prawns and the cholesterol in eggs isn't the problem. It's probably more likely the fatty cuts of meat like sausages or deep fried foods like donuts or like fried chicken or chips or possibly one of these other things here, deli meats, processed snack foods that are high in saturated fat. Any high saturated fat foods, butter, cream included, are the biggest impactors on our dietary saturated fat intake and therefore our cholesterol levels. So what we want to do is we want to replace our fatty meats and our processed foods that are high in saturated fat with lower fat, lower kilojoule options. So for instance, that could be, instead of having a Scotch fillet steak, having chicken breast or a meat-free Monday day where you have legumes instead. Or instead of having red meat 5 days a week, mixing that up a little bit and having other options like seafood and chicken and legumes instead, mixing it all up a little bit. Boosting your fibre intake will also help promote getting rid of LDL cholesterol. So how it works is fibre binds to LDL cholesterol and helps you poop it out the back door. Never seen again. But if you have a low fibre intake, most of our LDL cholesterol is recycled and reuptaked back into our body. So that means if you increase your fibre intake, you can increase the amount that's getting rid of, and that means your overall levels are going to go down. So the best ways to boost your fibre intake is to eat more fruit, more veggies, more whole grains, nuts and seeds, and legumes. Those are all our plant foods that are high in fibre. Right, next, in particular with our fruit and veggies, we're going to aim for more colours the better. So the colourful veggies and fruit have antioxidants which are protective, which help keep our arteries healthy and protect against oxidative damage. So more of our windy vegetables like cabbage, kale, cauliflower, broccoli, our orange vegetables like pumpkin, sweet potato, carrot, tomatoes, and then our purple and blue kind of coloured veggies and fruit like your red cabbage, beetroot, blueberries. There's a reason why we say eat more fruits and veggies. So we want to replace afternoon snack of cheese and crackers. White crackers are high in vegetable oil, which is not great, and cheese is high in saturated fat. If we swap that to a snack of a handful of nuts, which are high in a different sort of fat called monounsaturated fat, that's going to help promote better cholesterol levels. And nuts also have fibre, and white crackers have pretty much bugger all. So getting moving as well can help improve your LDL cholesterol. So getting some form of exercise is super important. So how are we going to raise the good guy? More HDL. So you want to aim for low-fat, lean meat options, same as with LDL, but you want to also be going for low-fat dairy, so low-fat yogurt, low-fat cheese, low-fat milk, ricotta, feta, and when you're choosing cuts of meat, you want to choose the leanest option and trim the fat off the outside. And if you can see marbling in it, try and go for the one without marbling because that's more saturated fat.
So can I just ask a question on that? Like, so one of the things about the low fat, probably more yogurt, my understanding is that if it's low fat, it's often high sugar. Some of the ones that...
I might answer that one at the end because that'll take a little bit, but we're almost towards the end now. All right, so we used to be back in the day, probably about 10, 20 years ago, they used to say a low-fat diet was the best thing for managing your cholesterol levels. We've come to understand that, yes, that does work, but a better way of doing it is replacing our saturated fat with our healthy fats. So our monounsaturated and our polyunsaturated fats. So that tends to lower LDL and raise the HDL. So you're getting the right ratio of cholesterol rather than just lowering overall fat intake. So things that are high in healthy fats are nuts and seeds, fatty fish such as your salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines, your olive oil, your avocado, everything in this picture here. We also want to replace our refined carbohydrate foods that are low in fibre and not really got much nutritional value or antioxidants in them, and replace them with whole grains that are high in fibre and high in antioxidants, and then also replacing some of our meats with legumes because they're high in fibre to help bring that LDL down and raise that HDL. All right, so longer bouts of exercise like your slow, steady state, cardio or swimming or walking tends to be the best for raising HDL cholesterol. But to be honest, Any exercise is great. So if you love doing high intensity boxing or you love doing lifting weights, any exercise is great. Weight loss and in maintaining a healthy weight is the best for raising your HDL. Just a 5% weight loss, which could be about 2 to 3 kilos for some people or up to 5 kilos for other people, could be just the right amount to help see an improvement in your blood work. Also, smoking tends to badly impact your LDL, makes it go really high, and it tends to lower your HDL. So that's why smokers are at especially high risk of heart attack and stroke. So stopping smoking is the best for your overall health. Alrighty, so that's the end of the presentation, but of course, if you want more information, if you want to clarify stuff, I can give you individualized advice in a one-on-one consult. That could be through a Medicare referral. If you're a veteran, that could be through DVA, or if you don't have those options, private visits are also available. And if you do want to get in contact with me, I do have cards here. I do have a few leftover referral sheets, but of course, if you want me to email you a Medicare referral sheet, I can send that to you as well because I've got your email address. But yeah, now's the time for questions. So I'll get back to you. So let me just paraphrase. No worries. So to paraphrase your question about the low-fat dairy, right? You were concerned about how low-fat dairy tends to be higher in sugar. Is that right?
Particularly the yogurt part.
Yeah, particularly yogurts. All right, so if I talk about in general, milk is made up of 3 macronutrients: protein, fat, and carbohydrate in a certain ratio. If you lower the fat content and it goes smaller, then of course the protein and the carbohydrate content are going to get more. So milk and milk products also can, let me just backtrack a bit. I've just lost my train of thought there. So milk naturally contains a sugar called lactose, which is why on the label it gets written as sugars, but it doesn't tell you that it's naturally containing sugars called lactose. So when you reduce the fat content, it looks like there's more sugar because there's more lactose, but it's not added sugar. Unfortunately, our labels in Australia do not differentiate between added sugar and naturally occurring sugar. So to give you a quick tip with yogurts, you want to aim for a yogurt that's less than 2 grams of fat, which is low fat, and you want to aim for a yogurt that's got less than 10 grams of sugar. And if you check on the ingredients list, you can see whether it's added sugar, whether they've got written sugar, glucose syrup, honey, agave syrup, something else, that's added sugar. And then you can also see if it hasn't got much of that, if it's naturally occurring sugar. There you go. But of course, I do have resources. So if you do see me in person, I can go through it a little bit more and provide you an actual list of the best yogurts out there. Yeah. Any other questions? Mm-hmm. Sorry, so what was added to your smoothies?
Bees honey.
Bees honey. Oh, well, honey is sugar. So honey is sugar, sugar is sugar. I try and just get people to limit the amount of added sugar in general that they add to their diet. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just adding extra kilojoules.
So what's, like, I don't have white sugar in the house at all.
Yeah.
I eat myself, but I do add a teaspoon or 2 of honey to my smoothie.
Mm.
So what's the, like Manuka honey, I know you don't understand the benefits of that.
Mm.
I don't put that in smoothies, so I have that on toast or something. So what is the advantage of honey as a food source?
Well, honey tends to be generally sweeter per gram compared to sugar, so people tend to use less, but still at the end of the day, it still gets digested into glucose. It's still digested quite fast and it's not very filling, and it's still classed as an added sugar. So I reckon just use it in moderation. That would be my recommendation. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, this is really a question, but I'll just let you know. Well, my cholesterol's 9 overall.
Yeah, total, yeah.
Yeah, total, and I've had a blood test and I'm 0.
Yeah.
For a blood test. So my doctor, I don't want to go on medication or anything like that. And I eat all good foods, don't eat the fat, stuff like that. So I just wondered why it might be that it's up high like that, because it's not affecting me at all.
Do you know your family history?
Yeah, mum and dad were 8 and 9.
Okay.
They started on, that was in their 80s.
Okay, and is there any family history in your family of heart disease or stroke? Okay, so it may...
A stroke would be, my dad used to smoke, so...
So it depends on, like, yes, other lifestyle factors, but of course it may be for you a genetic issue. But, you know, if you want to find out, we can do a full assessment of your diet, like, individually, and see if there are any areas you could improve on.
Yeah.
But
my diet is the good stuff that you have, nuts, and I don't eat sugar. I do all the exercise, so I do everything. So I just saying, it's just a funny scenario.
you might be one of those outliers, but then you might also benefit from making other dietary changes, such as increasing fibre, trying a bioactive substance such as plant sterols to lower your cholesterol, which is a natural way of doing it. So, yeah, but that would be individual. So,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
Any other questions?
Yes, sort of two questions if I can. Because we live on the coast here. We've got sugar from North Queensland right down to central New South Wales, and how do you sort of sit with that? You know, because sugar basically is poison, and
yeah. Okay. What's your question?
You got to look after your sugar. You got to look after your farmers, your industry. So how can you tell people to reduce their sugar intake? Sugar itself, sucrose, and sort of.
So your question is like, where do I stand in terms of supporting local farmers and then also supporting people's health?
The whole industry, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I reckon that it's more so important about dietary patterns. So reducing people's intake of processed food will naturally increase their intake of sugar. Sugar isn't necessarily bad, but when it takes up a lot of our diet because it's in a lot of processed foods, and generally Australians have probably about 30% of their energy intake coming from those treat foods or those sometimes foods that tend to be high in sugar and saturated fat. So in general, I'm looking at overall dietary patterns and just having them sometimes, not getting rid of them completely because that would be boring, but it's about balance. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Second question was, I've been in the meat industry for 50 years.
Yeah.
And the best tasting meat, if you want,
Yeah.
it's got a lot of
Marbling,
fat,
yeah.
a lot of fat in it, and
Yeah.
we used to send Japoks to Japan, and it was really they loved it if it was nearly all fat.
Yeah.
But honestly, it does give the best flavour. So what would you say if you? I saw a Wagyu steak in Woolworths the other day for $60, and I would have liked to try it because I know it would taste good. But what do? Reduce your intake? You know, like if you have meat every night, maybe.
Well, I don't think everyone's buying Wagyu steak every week, but in general, I would say I would put, a fatty cut of meat as a sometimes food, not an everyday food. So if in general, your general dietary pattern is having red meat that's high in fat every now and then, and your rest of your diet is accounting for low saturated fat intake and high intakes of good fats, every now and then having a Wagyu steak is fine. But most people I see are having high fat meats every day of the week almost. They're crumbed meats, they're sausages, they're, leaving the fat on the outside of their meat. That's the types of things that people do. So I in general want to improve the 90% of the diet and leave the 10% for fun stuff, like Wagyu steak, which I have also eaten, which is also great and melts in your mouth. But I don't eat that every day. Any other questions? Yeah.
The sterile tablets, do you recommend taking those?
I haven't seen in terms of registered product that are plant sterols, but usually we have plant sterols added to things like Proactive or Wheat Bix or milk, and there's a few more products coming onto the market over the years which help lower cholesterol. Plant sterols are a bioactive compound which is derived from about 10 kilos of vegetables into probably about a few particles of plant sterols, and that naturally lowers cholesterol levels, which is why you have products like Proactive and cholesterol lowering Wheat Bix, because we know it works, but you need to get a certain dose every day in order for it to be effective. So it's something I use as an adjunctive therapy in people who are really struggling with their cholesterol levels to help bring them down, but there's lots of other things we could work on as well. I would definitely be looking for a registered product, not something that is randomly bought off the internet. I usually go for functional food products rather than supplements. Any other questions? Yeah.
If you reduce it down that much, is it altering the quality of the product?
No, because it's a bit like essential oils. So you've got thousands and thousands of roses, and you remove the very, very small particle of rose essence and you turn that into rose essential oil, which is why pure rose essential oil is so expensive, because it's thousands of roses. It is in very small quantities in our plant foods, so eating kilos and kilos of vegetables is impossible for us, which is why they synthesize it and concentrate it down to put into a product. Yeah, does that make sense?
It just seems unimaginable to take that much and strengthen it. Say, this is the good part. Mind boggles when you put all those vegetables, and how do you actually really get just the good part?
Yeah, well, the plant sterols are just one individual portion of vegetables that is useful. That's why they've done it that way.
The processing of it seems to me like, it just seems unrealistic to take that much and then shrink it down and say, well, that's the good part, that we've been able to get that out of it. Reality of it seems.
Well, I suppose it depends. If you don't want to use those products, that's fine, but for a lot of people it's what keeps their cholesterol levels under control, and I only use them for certain people, and it's not wasteful, it's waste vegetable products that they're using to do that process. Yeah.
Do you think that, I think you touched on Michael Mosley, do you think the fasting is good for, I know that you normally if you get a cholesterol test you do fast, but is fasting overall usually have a good impact on cholesterol?
It's not, the research is mixed at the moment, so we're not sure whether it's the fasting that's giving the health benefits or whether it's the reduced energy intake that people are experiencing the positive benefits from. I'm leaning towards it's probably the reduced energy intake in general. Most people who are wanting to lose weight tend to eat too much energy in their day, so fasting for a period of their day is how they achieve that. I use intermittent fasting as a kind of a hack to make it easier for people to lose weight, but in and itself it isn't anything magical as yet. We don't know for sure, but it's kind of like 50-50 at the moment. So one day we'll find out. Yep.
Is there a healthy fat percentage?
We don't have a recommended number for how much healthy fats you should be getting in your diet. But we do have prescriptive amounts of dietary patterns over a week. For instance, I say to people having an oily fish, 150 grams twice a week is what we recommend. Having a handful, 30 grams of nuts every day. So there are dietary patterns, but there isn't a prescriptive amount. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
If your parents have high cholesterol, so it's a genetic thing.
Yeah.
Can you change it around by diet, or are you destined to always have high cholesterol?
It depends whether your parents' high cholesterol is truly genetic or whether it's more lifestyle related. So, of course, we usually tend to pick up the habits and lifestyle habits of our parents. So usually that's carried on in the next generation. But yes, for some people it is genetic. But I have seen people who've come to me and said, oh, it's really high, it's always high, it's genetics. And then we've just changed their diet and it's come down of its own accord. So it's very individual. It's hard to tell if something is genetic. We do not have genetic testing yet to test for that type of thing because we haven't isolated the particular genes that are associated with genetically high cholesterol levels. So I would go with the diet changes first and then see what happens.